What does transparency look like between founders and investors?
So as transparency in any relationship, I think the key thing is about being honest, having frequent communication. What I've really found is investors hate being surprised. So, and naturally in the startup world, things will go wrong at times. So it's about keeping them informed and forming a relationship based on trust.
I completely agree, and I think that I think it's important to have a structure also to the amount of times per year that you have board meetings, just to give them that knowledge that information is coming and that it's being shared in a way that is appropriate to the requirements of the business. But that once you have that, I feel like it's also important that the investors let the founders, the team, the operators get on and run the business.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. It's about managing expectations. So trying to find out, everybody around your board table has different expectations or objectives that they want from the company, and then having those open conversations, and then they need to let you sort of get on with it.
And I think also one thing like we were talking about before is that when a really transparent relationship, I think will, both parties will understand what the other party is looking to get out of this venture, right?
Yeah.
So the investors may understand that for the founders, their whole lives depend on this and on what they're building, but equally that there may come a point where they need to take some secondary off the table. And for the founders also, it's important that they understand how it works and the metrics by which the investors will gauge the success of the business. So I think it's just important that everybody is aligned to what everybody is expecting to get out of it.
How do you approach conversations about equity when raising?
Well, I think how we've always looked at it is starting at a point of using comparables, because then you're not coming and saying, I think my business is valued at X million, and you may be laughed out the room, but actually you're coming from a point of this is what the market has been paying for businesses like this. So we always start like that, but then it's a conversation, right? The investors, obviously they're in this instance, what they want to do is minimize the valuation as much as they can, which is the opposite of what they'll want to do, for the rest of their lifetime with you.
One thing I learned early on, which everybody says, and it ends up being so true, is you always need more money than you think you're going to need, and then there's an issue of dilution. But I think we get too obsessed about the valuations, and it's kind of this thing, not a badge of honor, but we all want to have who has the bigger valuation, and it becomes a bit of a...
And it's actually counterintuitive, because the bigger your valuation, obviously the higher you have to sell the business for your investors to make profit and to see the returns that they need. So it's actually not great to have that high valuation.
Yeah, and also because everybody's obsessed with the valuation, they're not understanding all the other terms in the term sheet.
Yeah.
The valuation is just one part of it. There could be a lot of downside protection. And I think for me, because my co-founder Alex Zasali, because he'd been in California and started Jawbone, he's kind of used to a lot more on the American ways of valuing companies, which yes, in the US it feels like the valuations are much higher, but there's a lot more downside protection.
Right.
So entrepreneurs are not aware that those equity shares could really change quite quickly as well.
Yeah, which is actually scarier.
Yeah.
I'd rather kind of know that, okay, my valuation wasn't, a crazy number that I'm going to go screaming about to all of London. It was a good number, but actually, if it hits the fan, I'm okay and I'm protected and I'm not going to have my business taken out of my hands. How does gender affect the way that investors come to the table?
I think there's enough studies, enough data to show that clearly there's a disproportionate of men, both on both sides of the table, both investors and entrepreneurs. So gender dynamics, how does it work? I'd say the same as other unconscious biases, age, race, all the rest of it. They're things which we need to become more aware of. I think VCs need to recognize that, that even though most of the people they see might be white, male, 20-something, that there's a lot of great entrepreneurs out there as well, and how to sort of, for example, even at Elvie, as we're growing, we're thinking about diversity, we're doing training on unconscious bias, because
us too, exactly.
It's such an important thing to keep doing. And for me, I went in to pitch, and I wasn't white, male, or 20-something, but I think ultimately you just have to go into that room, like you said, and just be confident and preempt what it is that they might be. It's almost like you write a list of all the reasons why they might not invest in your business, and part of it is probably to do with you, and you need to just make sure you preempt those negative assumptions before they even take hold.
For you have something amazing, because you are in, I don't know how you classify it, but it's a female product, it's femtech, right? And so you're the expert in that, and you go into a room with investors, you're kind of opening up their eyes to this whole market that these male investors may not know exists, or that there is such a demand and such a need for, but you know, based on your life experience, that we need these pumps, you know, and all your other products as well.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, our products are focused on women, so I think, and I'm obviously a female entrepreneur, and so people self-select in. Investors who are not interested in women's issues or don't understand that these are real issues that need to be resolved, they won't even take a meeting with us. So by the time you get a meeting, then it's...
Yeah, and their portfolios are probably really dry, so we're fine.
They're not the people we want around the table.
Exactly, exactly.
Cool. But how do you think gender plays into...
Well, obviously it's a problem.
Yeah.
And, you know, like you said, there are so many stats and statistics about, you know, why male investors are more likely to invest in male founders. And, you know, perhaps it's also to do with the fact that men tend to be more confident, be more assertive, over-project, whereas we're more, this is what we realistically think we can achieve with the business. And so this is what we are going to tell you we can do. Which may, you know, have a negative impact on how the investors see the business. I actually think that shows that we are, you know, honest, and that we will run a business based on solid foundation. So I actually think that's a really good thing.
Yes, but fake it till you make it is a real thing. I mean, I agree with you, and I think British women in particular, we're kind of almost at a double disadvantage. Because I think British people compared to, say, Americans, we tend to understate
100%.
things, and then women don't lean in as much as you're saying. I think there's a lot of evidence around that. And so I think when you go into pitch, so you do have to kind of sell that dream. What is the best way to go about allocating spend after raising money?
For us, it's always kind of been looking at each department and looking at department needs, and then trying to rein them in a little bit, because certain departments always think that the more they can spend, the better, which, you know, is the case maybe in R&D, isn't the case for other departments. So we tend to go department by department, build the budgets, and then kind of have a few back and forths with the various different team members, with finance and etc. How do you do it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I suppose, because the startups, we're constantly raising money, but you're absolutely right. We should just have a plan, strategy and plan in place, and we just implement according to that. It shouldn't just be because you raise money that suddenly everything necessarily changes, but obviously psychologically it does. Actually, we had a funny one last year because we ended up raising a lot more than we planned to at the Series B. So we sort of closed it, and then suddenly we've actually got more money to spend than we'd assumed we would have. So we didn't really have much of a strategy in place, and we just thought we'd do more of the same, but actually it allowed us to stop and rethink it. But something Alex Sadie, my co-founder, always said from his Jawbone days, because they raised a lot of money, and he's just always said, Tania, like, the more money you raise, the more money you waste. And I think, like what you said, what's important is actually we still need to be careful about spend. I think a lot of people can blow quite a lot.
We've seen so many stories like that, right? Especially in the past sort of 12 months, where companies are literally just like burning through cash, and it's growth. It's always growth. Yeah. But, you know, where does that actually get you? And at the end of the day, that's fine. It's all well to kind of pump cash into growth. But if fundamentally your unit economics don't stack up, there's a problem. How do you sell a new or untapped idea to an investor?
When we first launched our first Elvie trainer, a lot of investors or people thought it was a niche product. But ultimately, the way I realised is the way to think about it is, first of all, don't worry about what investors think. You know, just focus on your user, your consumer. Make sure you're developing something that's going to solve a problem for them. So I just sort of ignored all that noise. But then also, when you talk to investors, I do realise that there's big exciting things everybody's excited in, right? So right now it might be self-driving cars, it might be drones, whatever it is, it's on trend, and that's where all the money goes. So if you're coming in on something like we were, which is women's health technology, didn't even have a name, nobody knew what it was, then you do get resistance. But I think what you need to do then is to persuade them, obviously, that what you're working on is going to be the next big thing. And for us, in some ways, that's quite straightforward, in the sense of anybody who said this is niche, how can they say that when 51% of the population in the UK are women? Yeah. Investors like pattern recognition. You know, they like to also know there's going to be follow-on funding. So when you're coming in with something really left field, I think the key thing for us was, you know, when we got rejections at the beginning, is sort of, again, list out why it is, what it is that they're saying. So they were like, you're never going to get this into retail, you'll never get a celebrity to talk about it, you'll never turn a profit, and all these sort of things. And I think it just pushes you to the bar's probably a bit higher than if you were something which is a bit more on trend.
I guess our product is also quite niche in the sense that there are a lot of co-working companies that any business can go into, and from the very first day that we opened, we were not for everyone. We were for the tech ecosystem. We wanted to build communities, we wanted to curate them, we wanted to have just really exciting communities of different entrepreneurs, different startups, scale-ups, investors, and that for us was just exciting. And so we've been kind of turning away people that didn't fit that mold of what we thought our communities needed from the first day, which made it quite niche. But actually, it being niche was the best thing that happened.
It made you different.
It made us different, and suddenly Huckletree, becomes the place where these people want to go because they're going to be around other people that they've heard of, or other founders that they know. I mean, how many founders do we have in common? It's that world. And I think creating a network of that across however many countries or what we may end up doing is actually just really exciting. And so it's niche, but for me it's much more exciting than doing something mass market.
In running your business, which software can you not live without?
Slack.
I was about to say the same. I mean, it's driving me crazy. There's so many channels.
There are so many channels, but it is literally the best thing. It's the one thing. I mean, I could probably get rid of everything else, but if we didn't have Slack, I just don't know what we would do. And I know there are other things, but I love Slack. And it's also, it's used in ways that just encourage social activity across the company. So, for example, every day, and I'm sure you guys do this too, but every day where there's a new person joining the team or someone leaving, the messages that come into Slack on the general or the random channel for that person is just, it's just all in one place, and it's warming.
No, absolutely. And it's also just what it does to your inbox. It's just so great not having internal emails. So.
And you can track things, like I know if I was talking about something to do with our space in Soho, it's going to be in this channel. So,
Nice.
What are teething issues founders come up against when trying to get investors over the line?
Well, first of all, it's just a numbers game. I don't think I realised that so much at the Series A, but definitely at the Series B, like, a numbers game since you that big funnel, right? So you need, for Series B, we literally started off with 12 investors, because even though you might have your favourite one, or you might be convinced that somebody's going to invest, you never really know how it's going to work out, and you are going to get a few rejections along the way, and ultimately, like we talked about before, you want to get to a point where you have multiple term sheets on the table. Like, that's the key objective. So just start with just a really large number. I think people don't realise, which is a huge amount of work, and the other thing is just the amount of preparation that's needed to practice your pitch, get 100%. Everybody moving through. And I think the key thing as well is to play the psychology, because VC investors, they all kind of know each other, and they know, they all talk to each other, right? So they're like, if you talk to Elvie, no, if somebody's turned you down, then it kind of, it's almost like a sniff of failure around you. I've heard VCs talk about that. So you need to play the psychology, and you need to basically move everybody at pace. So like literally start off with your 10 or 12 and move them literally within about 3-4 weeks, and aim to get that term sheet there, because you just want to move it through quickly and actually create the opposite to that sense of rejection, but that kind of actual FOMO, and I think that can happen too. People get really excited,
100%,
and then obviously once you get one term sheet, you can just move everybody along. So it's definitely an art to it, and I think for me, we've been relatively successful with fundraising. I think it's because I had entrepreneurs on the board, so Alexandra Chong on my board, or Tom Adiula. They'd kind of been through that, and they really sort of held my hand, prepping on the pitches, telling me how to even respond to emails, and how to kind of
that's
get
amazing,
it right.
Because sometimes it's the response to an email that you can structure it in a way that generates that FOMO or doesn't. I think everything that you're saying is pretty much what I would have said too. It's about owning the narrative, owning the timelines, and making sure that you're kind of a few steps ahead, like already thinking when you're at the beginning, if you want to allocate some shares to an ESOP pool, for example, that you're already ahead of that, and right, I want 5% to be carved out for ESOP, so that these things aren't coming up last minute and then getting in the way.
And I think the other key thing actually, which I see a lot, is it's a bit which a lot of people think is quite boring, but the legal side, like, you need to get completely on top of the legal terms when the term sheets say you can't just rely on your lawyer. So I talk to so many entrepreneurs who kind of sign term sheets, and again, maybe they've just focused on the valuation, but they just didn't realise all the ways that they're being tied in.
And I think on that, another point that I always make is that you have to have good lawyers. Like, I think there are loads of areas in the business, especially when you're starting out, that you can be scrappy with. You can do in-house, you can pay someone to do it, but not the most expensive. But for us, like, having good lawyers has been a saving grace throughout, because you're in good hands. They're thinking about the things that you don't even know you need to be thinking about, because how can you know until
but how would you define good lawyer? Because what I realised, it doesn't necessarily mean the big name lawyer, because those big law firms often haven't worked on our kind of term sheets. So,
Yeah.
for example, Paul Chiappe, who's our lawyer at Jolson, like he's done so many VC term sheets. Literally, when we went with our VC term sheet, he'd already seen like 5 from that VC that year. So he's able to say, that's where you can push and that's where you need to give.
Exactly. And we had the exact same thing. So we were with Adrian Rainey at Taylor Weston. He left, but he just knew it. He knew all about like raising VC money and how to structure the term sheet, and that was a big help for us.
Yeah. And you need that lawyer there too, because however friendly you are with your VC investor, there's going to be arguments and disagreements over the terms. So you need the lawyers to also have that kind of be the bad cop, because you need to then pick it up afterwards and have a good relationship.
Yeah, exactly.